Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We are really excited to be kicking off a brand new season.
It feels great to be back.
Yeah, and what better way than jumping right into some really foundational ideas? You, our listeners, have sent in some great sources, and we're just thrilled to get back to exploring them with you.
Absolutely. It's always, fascinating to see what comes in and the discussions they spark.
Totally. And today, we're immersing ourselves in, well, a real cornerstone of marketing thinking. Last 22 Lies Immutables del Marketing by Ries and Trout.
Ah, yes, a seminal work. Really, anyone interested in the fundamentals of how marketing actually works should probably take a look at this.
Right. Ries and Trout, they have such an impressive track record.
Oh, absolutely. Titans, really.
We're talking, what, over 4 decades of experience between them? They also wrote those other influential books, Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind.
Right, and bottom-up marketing. Their expertise is, well, it's globally recognized. They've consulted everywhere.
Exactly. Their principles have shaped, countless marketing strategies over the years.
And Last 22 Lies does a really fantastic job, I think, of boiling down their core insights into these digestible laws.
And that seems to be precisely the book's goal. It lays out these 22 fundamental laws that Ries and Trout argue are like the bedrock of marketing success.
But they don't mess around.
No, they draw on this huge range of examples, historical, contemporary, analyzing, what works, but also, crucially, what doesn't work.
And what's really compelling is how firm they are about these laws. They're not just suggestions or guidelines.
Exactly. That's the key thing. The book's core message is pretty blunt. Violate them at your own risk. It really sets the tone, doesn't it? Expect a critical look at marketing practices.
hmm And you have to note their dedication, too. Something like dedicated to the elimination of myths and erroneous concepts in the marketing process.
Right, which really highlights their aim to cut through the noise, the fads, and focus on principles that last.
Enduring principles, exactly.
Okay, so let's get into some of these enduring principles. For this deep dive, we're going to explore several of the most, well, impactful laws from the book.
That's good.
We'll highlight the core ideas, those moments that really crystallize how effective marketing works. Our goal, like always, is to give you a kind of shortcut to being well-informed so you can quickly grasp these fundamentals and see how they play out. So, where should we start? Which law first?
Let's kick off with the law of leadership.
Yeah.
The basic idea is simple. It's better to be first than it is to be better.
First mover advantage.
Kind of, but more specifically, first in the prospect's mind.
Yeah.
It's about establishing that initial connection.
That initial entry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems incredibly powerful. We do tend to remember the first, don't we? Even if something technically better comes along later.
Precisely. The book uses that classic example, Charles Lindbergh. Everyone knows him, right? First to fly solo across the Atlantic.
Yep, household name.
Okay, now, who was second? Can you name the second guy? Bert Hinkler?
No. Honestly, no clue.
Right. And that's the point. For most people, that name just isn't there. It shows this cognitive bias where being first creates this really strong memory imprint.
That's a great illustration.
Yeah.
And this first idea, it obviously applies directly to brands. Being the first one to establish yourself in a specific category inside the consumer's head, that gives you a huge, often lasting advantage.
Absolutely. Think about brands that really pioneered their categories. Miller Lite, which the book mentions, was the first light beer.
Right.
That first mover status, it created massive hurdles for competitors, and it basically defined what light beer even meant for a long time.
Which leads us perfectly into the next one, doesn't it? The law of the category.
Exactly.
If you can't be first in an existing category, the law says, well, create a new category where you can be first.
Spot on. Miller Lite's success wasn't just about being first in beer generally, which they weren't. They smartly defined and then owned the light beer category. It's like creating your own playing field.
And the book contrasts that strategic move with Anheuser-Busch, right? Their initial reluctance about low-calorie beers.
Yeah, they hesitated. Even though Heineken was having success with imported light beer, AB was slow on the domestic front. They missed that chance to be first in what became a huge domestic category.
Which really highlights the importance of, I guess, the next law you mentioned, the law of the mind.
Yes, exactly, the law of the mind. It argues it's actually better to be first in the mind than first in the market. They aren't always the same thing.
That's a really important difference. So marketing, according to Ries and Trout, it's fundamentally a battle for perception, right? Not just about who launched first or who has the most features.
Precisely. That cognitive edge, being first in mind, often trumps being first to market.
Mm.
Think about the early personal computers. The book points out MIT's Altair was technically the first PC available.
Okay, I vaguely remember hearing about that.
But it was IBM coming in later that really dominated the market and became synonymous with personal computer in most people's minds. They got there first mentally when the category really exploded.
Right, which ties directly into the law of perception then. Marketing isn't a battle of products, it's a battle of perceptions.
Exactly. It hammers home that idea. In marketing, what the customer believes is the reality you have to deal with.
You could have a technically superior product, but if everyone thinks it's unsafe or unreliable, you've got a massive problem.
The example of Japanese cars entering the U.S. market early on illustrates this perfectly.
Mm.
Even if the quality was good, there was this initial widespread perception they were less safe.
Right, smaller cars, different engineering philosophy, perhaps.
And overcoming that perception, that took a huge, sustained effort over many years.
Absolutely. And they also mention Audi, don't they, with the unintended acceleration issue.
Yeah, a huge perception challenge.
Hmm.
Even when expert analysis didn't fully back up the claims in the way the media portrayed it, the public perception became the major hurdle.
So, okay, perception is key. How do brands effectively shape those perceptions then? That must lead us to the law of focus.
You got it, the law of focus. This law argues that the single most powerful thing in marketing is owning one word in the prospect's mind.
One word. That sounds simple but powerful.
It is. It's about establishing a really clear, concise association. It taps into how our brains work, you know? We like mental shortcuts. A single strong link is easy to remember.
Think about those iconic ones. Crest.
Cavity protection,
Right, Mercedes-Benz,
engineering,
Volvo.
safety.
Exactly. These brands have just drilled down on one core attribute consistently.
Yeah, they become the go-to mental shortcut for that specific benefit. Someone thinks car safety, Volvo pops up. That focus is incredibly efficient. And the book contrasts this with brands like Lotus, which maybe struggled historically with a less defined focus.
Okay, so you fight to own that word. And once a brand does own a word, the law of exclusivity kicks in.
Right. This one says it's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for two companies to own the same word in the prospect's mind effectively.
Like the Volvo example again.
Yeah.
Because they own safety so strongly.
Exactly. It'd be really tough for Mercedes or any other brand known for safety features to truly usurp Volvo for that specific word safety. The mental slot is filled.
Federal Express and overnight delivery is another classic they mention, right?
Absolutely. For years, if you needed it there overnight, FedEx was overnight in your head. They own that concept.
Okay, so what if you're not the brand that owns the top spot, the main word? What's your strategy then? That must be where the law of the ladder comes in.
Precisely, the law of the ladder. This law suggests we mentally rank brands in a category, like rungs on a ladder.
Oh, okay. Like a hierarchy.
Exactly. And your marketing strategy needs to acknowledge which rung your brand occupies in the consumer's mind.
The book uses car rentals, right? Hertz, often seen as number one.
Yeah, Hertz at the top, then often Avis, maybe National below that. And Avis famously, brilliantly, used their number 2 spot.
We try harder.
We try harder. Exactly. It acknowledged their position, but turned it into a positive differentiator.
That was smart. It leveraged the perception instead of fighting it head on. The law warns against pretending you're number one if you're clearly not, right? It just doesn't ring true.
Right. It lacks credibility. People know who the leader generally is.
Okay. Now, thinking bigger picture, competitive landscapes over time. What happens? That's the law of duality.
Yes, the law of duality. This law observes that over the long haul, most markets tend to shake out into a two-horse race.
Two dominant players.
Yeah. Markets might start fragmented, but they often consolidate around two main competitors who grab most of the market share and, crucially, the mind share.
We see that everywhere. Coke and Pepsi.
The ultimate example.
Oh,
or
wait.
Gillette and Schick in razors.
Right. Others exist, but those two dominate the narrative and the shelf space.
Exactly.
So if you are number 2 in one of these developing two-horse races, what's the smart play? That must be the law of the opposite.
You're connecting the dots perfectly. The law of the opposite. If you're seriously gunning for that strong number 2 position, your strategy is largely dictated by the leader.
How so?
A powerful approach is to position yourself as the opposite of the leader. be the alternative.
Ah, like Pepsi again, the choice of a new generation.
Classic example. They position themselves against the old, established Coke. They define themselves in contrast to the leader.
And the book suggests Burger King maybe missed opportunities by not consistently being the clear opposite of McDonald's.
Yeah, they argue BK's positioning has sometimes been muddled, not always a clear, sustained, opposite strategy, which can dilute its impact.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift from competitors to categories themselves. How do they change? That's the law of division.
Right, a law of division.
Yeah.
This law points out that over time, a broad product category tends to split, to divide into two or more distinct, specialized subcategories.
Like computers, that's a perfect example.
Absolutely. Started with mainframes, right? Then they branched into mini computers, then personal computers.
Then laptops, tablets, smartphones, wearables, each becoming its own thing.
Exactly. Each a new category,
Yeah.
essentially. And you see it in beer, too.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, maybe it started simple. Imported versus domestic. Then, bam, light beer becomes a huge separate category. Then non-alcoholic beer carved out its niche. Now craft beers, hard seltzers, endless division.
Creates new opportunities to be first in a new category.
Precisely. It cycles back.
Okay, one more crucial one, the law of perspective.
Ah, yes.
Right.
Very important. This law reminds us that marketing effects, the real ones, happen over an extended period. It's a long game.
Not just about next quarter's sales figures.
Exactly. Those short-term tactics, like constant sales promotions, they might boost volume right now, sure.
Mm.
But the book warns they can have bad long-term effects, like training customers to only buy on sale. That kills your pricing power and brand value down the line.
So it's that tension between short-term results and long-term brand building. Finding the balance. Yeah, you have to think about the lasting impact of your marketing on how people perceive and value your brand, not just the immediate bump.
Think years, not just weeks or months.
Absolutely. Consider the cumulative effect on brand equity, on customer relationships. That takes time.
Right. So wrapping this up, it really feels like Lost 22 Lies Immutable Still Marketing offers this incredibly solid foundation, these principles, backed by so many real-world stories.
Yeah, grounded in examples.
They really drive home how vital perception is, the sheer power of having a sharp focus, and why you absolutely need that long-term perspective for building strong brands.
Definitely. And the laws, they seem simple on the surface, but they provide this surprisingly deep framework for understanding market dynamics. They push you towards a more strategic way of thinking beyond just chasing the latest trend.
We really hope you, the listener, take these laws and sort of mull them over. Think about how they might apply in your world, whether you're, launching something new, tweaking a strategy, or just trying to make sense of the business landscape.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to leave you with. In today's world, things change so fast, right?
So.
New tech, shifting consumer habits.
Constantly.
So the provocative question is, which of these supposedly immutable laws do you think might be under the most pressure today? Which ones might need the most, let's say, nuanced interpretation going forward?
That's a great question. Definitely something to chew on.
Yeah, food for thought.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We're already excited for our next exploration together.